Did you know that the Northwoods Kindred isn't just a podcast? We are a living, breathing kindred with all kinds of helpful stuff all over the web. Now, we've made it super easy and convenient for you to stalk us by putting everything that we have into one easy-to-find location. In the description below, we added our link tree, and that'll take you to everything that we have all over the net. I hope that helps. Þórr, viki, my friends. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Northwoods Kindred podcast. I'm Bodvarr, the chieftain and Gothi of the Northwoods. And today we're going to read another story. And this one's going to be a great one. We're going to read from Teutonic Myth and Legend by Donald Mackenzie. Copyright 1934. And I'll actually be reading it from a copy of first print from 1934. So it hasn't been edited, updated, refined, or any of that garbage. It's all a first print. And we're going to read the story of Thor's Great Fishing. Not necessarily the most descriptive title, but it's really the story of Thor and Tyr going to visit Tyr's mother and secure themselves a kettle for Aegir's great beer hall, so he can brew enough mead and beer to entertain the Æsir and the Vanir in his great hall. To kind of cement a new friendship. So that's really the gist of the whole story. Thor and Tyr go on this epic journey together, which is always amazing when we have gods and stuff teaming up. But I think something to pay attention to in this story that might really kind of change your perspective is, because we have a lot of division, like with the Asatru and Vanatru and Rakatru and Lokatru and whatever, all these other truths. But if you really pay attention to the details of the story, it appears very much that Tyr is a more giant kin than Æsir or Vanir kin. So that's interesting, because if you're one of the people in one camp or another who says you only honor this pantheon or that pantheon, then it's really hard to take stock of which pantheon is which. I personally believe that the gods are more like state residents, and if you move to a different state, you're in a different residency, and you're in a different pantheon. It kind of feels like that sometimes when you read through the lore. You can make your own decisions. I just thought that's an interesting little quirk that kind of rears itself in this story, and it's just kind of something to keep in mind as you listen to it. So let me get some housekeeping out of the way. You asked for it, so we did it. Northwoods Kindred now has some amazing swag that we created just for our tribesmen. We have branded specialty shirts, tote bags, coffee cups, and even our signature NWK bucket hats. No more tired old Viking designs pillaged from the net. These are high-quality products that you can only get by visiting our Teespring store. And most are available in a wide variety of sizes and color options. There's certainly something there to make every Norse heathen a happy camper. Link is in the link tree below. Did you know that Gija Skogel and I have a small business called Survival Hardware LLC? We are dedicated to handcrafting heirloom quality goods, real handmade products like knives, jewelry, and rich leather goods. All of our products are made with love and care right here in our Idaho shop and are sure to be among your most prized articles. If you sign up for the newsletter when you get there, we'll get a 10% discount in your email off of the entire site for your first purchase. So fill up your cart, enjoy American-made products that'll last several lifetimes, and a 10% discount just for being awesome. Explore the site when you're there, because we also have some free and cheap digital downloads that are sure to enrich your pagan practices. And more are being added all the time. Our link tree is in the description below. And now we're back. So without further ado, Thor's Great Fishing from Teutonic Myth and Legend by Donald Mackenzie. Ægir, the storm god, had long heard of the fame and wisdom of Odin and his Asa clan, and there fell a day when he went to visit them. Thus it came that vows of lasting friendship were sworn between them. The gods were in due season invited to a harvest end feast in the dwelling of the storm god in the midst of the western sea, and thither they joined together. It was from Aegir's hall that Thor and Tyr set forth to do valiant deeds in the realm of the giant Hymir. The kingdom of Ægir is beyond Noten, the safe ship haven of the god Njord, which ever had peace, save when it was visited by Skadi, the stormy one. A fierce and aged giant is Ægir, with long and foam-white beard, and black is his helmet. When he rises in the midst of ocean, cold-hearted and turbulent, he shatters fair vessels in his wrath. Many ships has Angrboda, hag of ironwood, driven by her wild easterly winds into the very jaws of Ægir. In Ægir's hall, gold is used for fire, and his brewing kettles seethe and boil like stormy seas. His wife is Ran, the fair Thyretis. She is possessor of a great net, in which she catches seafarers when their ships are broken. So are men drowned to Ran. At the sea bottom is her home, which gleams phosphorescent and golden. Its roof is of silver and sun-gemmed azure. Nigh is it unto the house of death. Eager is Ran to make captives, and those who would win her favor must needs, when they are drowned down to her, take with them offerings of gold, for she loves treasure, and her hoard is great. To those whom she receives without anger, she offers a seat and a bed. 9 giant maids are the chief daughters of Ran, and these are the mothers of Heimdall, the shining sentinel of beauteous Bifrost. In gowns of blue they go forth. They have foam-white veils, and their locks are pale as sea froth. The sea maidens are ever at Aegir's command, and by him are they sent abroad to be ship-tossing billows. Great rocks they love to scatter and throw down, and the shoreline they devour. These giant maids at the beginning ground Ymir's body on the world mill, and ever do they turn the great mill at the sea bottom. Engaya and Irgjöffa grind mold. Jarnsaxa is the crusher of the iron, which comes from clay and the sea. Imdir, Yelp, Greip are fire maids, for from the world mill is fire sparked forth, and there is fire in the sea. Istla, Irgjaffa, and Ufrun are also at work like the others. The sire of Gjalp and Greip was Geirrod, the fire giant. Now when Aegir went to Asgard, he was received by Odin and the other gods with pomp and in state. Together they drank mead, ancient and sweet, in spacious Valhall, which was adorned with burnished shields and made bright by shining swords. High sat the gods in their doomed seats, and in the full grandeur. By Bragi's side would Aegir, and the sweet-voiced divine poet sang of Idun and her apples of immortal youth, and of Theseus' death, and of how Odin took from Suttung's dwelling the skaldic mead which Ivaldi had stolen. Pleasant were the tales to Aegir and the gods. As we have told, he besought to visit them in his ocean kingdom. Thither at autumn equinox went Odin and his Asa clan to drink mead and hear ancient tales and the singing of skalds. But of mead there was not sufficient, because Aegir was in need of a brewing kettle, large enough to give due hospitality to the gods. He besought Thor to fetch the greatest kettle in 9 worlds, but nor Asa nor Vanagods knew where it could be found until Tyr spoke and said, Hymir, the dog-headed, my foster father, hath the great kettle, which is exceedingly strong and a mile in depth. His dwelling is beyond the river Ivalgar, nigh to the borders of Niflheim. Thinkest thou that the kettle can be captured? Asked Thor. Yes, Tyr answered, by stratagem it may be procured. Then took Thor and Tyr the guise of young men, and they set forth in the thunder god's chariot drawn by 2 goats, Tanangjöstr and Tanangrisnir. Nearly all day did they travel until they came into the dwelling of Orvandel Egil. There did Thor leave the horn-strong goats and his sublime car. Across Elvarga they went, and past the vast fishing grounds of Hymir, where he is wont to catch whales on great hooks. Then a great distance journeyed the gods on foot towards Hymir's dwelling, through dense mountain woods, and past dismal rocky caverns, where dwell the fierce giants and monsters of Hymir's clan. When they came to their journey's end, they entered the king giant's great stronghold, and there Tyr saw his grandmother, a giantess with numerous heads, who was fierce and awesome and bold. But his mother, who had great beauty, brought them mead to drink. When they were refreshed and strong again, she bade them hide behind a great post at the gable end and beneath the kettles of Hymir, because, as she warned them, the giant was wont to give ill treatment to strangers who came nigh to his dwelling. At nightfall Thor and Tyr heard a mighty shout, which was raised by the giant's servants, whereat Hymir entered carrying the whales he had caught. His long beard was white with hoarfrost. Welcome art thou indeed, O Hymir, his wife said. My son, for whom I have long waited, has come to thy hall, and with him is one who is an enemy of the giants and a friend of man. Behind yonder gable post have they with cunning concealed themselves. Hymir was ill pleased, and he turned fiercely towards the post, which suddenly went to pieces before his piercing gaze. Thereat the beam above it broke, and the kettles fell down. 7 of them were thus broken, but one was so large and so strong that it was left whole, although it sank deep into the floor. Forth then came Tyr and Thor. The giant had no pleasure in receiving them, but he bade them be seated at his table. A great feast did he cause to be prepared. 3 oxen were slain and roasted, and placed before the giant and the gods. 2 of these did Thor eat, for he sought great strength. If the giant was angry before, he was still more angry when the meal was ended, for it was his purpose to slay his guest, as was his wont, if they failed to eat an equal share with him. But in this he was indeed thwarted. Extravagant is our fare, Hymir growled in his displeasure. On the morrow we must eat fish. Then to bed they all went, and sound was their sleep throughout the night. At dawn Thor rose, and from the window he perceived that the giant was making ready his boat to go fishing. Hastily did the Asa god dress himself. He placed his great hammer in his belt. He went towards the shore, and then he besought the giant to allow him to row with him in the great boat. Hymir looked down upon him with contempt, and said, Too small and frail art thou to be of help to me. Besides, I row so far and stay so long at sea that thou would be chilled to death. Thor answered, I shall row as far as thou hast need of me, as far from the land as is thy desire. Nor am I certain which of us twain would wish to return first. The thunder god was filled with wrath against the ice giant because of his presumption, and was minded to strike him down with his hammer. But he remembered that he had need of all his strength elsewhere, and must not do aught to lessen it. What bait hast thou for me? Asked Thor. Hymir answered with surly voice, If thou wouldest fish, find thine own bait. That Thor did with impatience. He hastened towards the giant's herd of great cattle, and seized the largest bull named Himinbrothir, which signified sky cleaver. He snatched off its head and carried it towards the shore. Hymir watched him and received him in silence, and together they entered the boat and put out to sea. Both then seized the great billow-raising oars. At the bow rode Hymir, and Thor was aft. So strongly did the Asagod pull that the boat went through the water with great swiftness, whereat the giant was amazed. Endeavor as he might, putting forth his utmost strength, Hymir could not pull with half the strength of the Asagod, who was still in youthful guise. The giant at length grew weary, and when they reached the grounds where he was wont to catch flat fish, he bade his companion cease rowing. But that Thor refused to do. We have not yet, he said, gone far enough to see. Soon they came to the grounds where whales are caught, and again the giant bade Thor to take rest, but he would not consent to do so. We must needs, Thor said, go much further yet. Further and farther out to sea they rowed, with exceedingly great speed. Then was the cold heart of Hymir filled with sharp alarm. If we stop not now, he cried, we shall be in danger of dread Midgard serpent. But Thor refused to pause, and rowed stronger and faster than before. Far out to sea the boat still sped, and rapid and strong were the oar sweeps of Thor, nor did he pause until they were a great distance from land. Then began the fishing. Hymir baited his hooks and cast his line in the deep waters. Ere long he caught 2 great whales and hauled them aboard. His eyes were bright with pleasure, and he turned towards Thor and challenged him to do as well. Then did the great thunder god get ready his fishing tackle, which was of great strength. An immense hook he baited with the head of Hymir's bull. Into the deep waters he flung his line, which as it splashed raised big billows, and he ran it out until the bait was dragging along the floor of the ocean. Now right below the giant's boat lay the Midgard serpent, all slimy and horrible on the sea bottom, with its mouth clutching the tail of its world-encircling body. When the great monster beheld the bait, it was deceived, not perceiving that Thor's hook was within. Greedily it seized the bull's head and sought to devour it. Then did the great hook sink deep into its throat and stick there. Tortured was the serpent with terrible agony, and it began to writhe violently to be free, but its struggle was without avail. So the line it tugged fiercely to draw the angler and boat beneath the waves. But greater than the serpent's was the strength of Thor. With both hands the god grasped the line, and against the side of the boat he placed his feet and began to pull, twisting the line around the oar pins as he did so, now and again making it fast, violently rocking the boat, and the waves rose high as the great Midgard serpent struggled with the thunder god. But Thor put forth his entire divine strength, and he grew in stature as he pulled the line. At length his feet went through the boat's side as it tilled over. They reached the ocean floor. Harder and harder he pulled, and unwillingly the serpent, stung with fierce pain, was hauled through the deep until its monstrous head came in sight. Awesome was the spectacle to Hymir, nor can words picture it. With fierce wrath did the thunder god dart fiery looks at the serpent, while the great monster tossed on high its terrible head and spouted floods of venom upon him. Hymir trembled with fear. His face was white as mountain snow. Scarce could he look upon the ferocious serpent, for ghastly it was, and bearded and venom-spotted. Great waves washed over the gunwales, and the giant feared that the boat would be swamped. Still Thor struggled with the fierce monster until he dragged its head close to the edge of the boat. Then, twisting the line around the oar pin, he seized his great hammer and struck a mighty blow on the serpent's head. The mountains shook with thunder, the caves howled loud, the ocean trembled with violence, and the whole world shrank together. But the Midgard serpent was not yet killed. Thor prepared to strike another great blow, but Hymir, in his fear, cut the line, whereas the withering monster sank back into the deep. The waves tossed high, and the boat plunged with them. Angrily Thor turned upon Hymir, and with his great right fist struck him a resounding blow. Headlong plunged the giant into the sea, but speedily and in great fear he scrambled back into the boat. Yet if his fear of the serpent was great, no less was his fear of Thor. Then set they to row back, and the boat went speedily. Thor spoke not. He sat in sullen silence. Deep indeed was his wrath, because he had slain not the serpent, which ever threatened the gods in Asgard. When the shore was reached, the giant leapt out proudly. He flung his 2 whales over his shoulder, but Thor carried the great boat, and went with it to the giant's stronghold. They entered the castle, and they sat down with Tyr beside them. Ill at ease was the giant because of Thor's great deeds, and him did challenge to perform another feat of strength. He brought forth a goblet and asked him to break it. Without raising from his seat, Thor flung it violently against a post, which was shattered into pieces. But the goblet remained whole, and it was brought back to the giant, who smiled, well content. Then Tyr's mother whispered to Thor. She bade him fling the goblet against Hymir's forehead, which was harder than aught else there. Thor did that right speedily. He seized the goblet and struck the giant at midway between the eyes. Nor broken was the giant's head, although the goblet fell shivered into pieces on the table before him. A great treasure have I lost, Hymir cried. Hot was the drink that came from my strong goblet. The giant's heart was filled with anger against Thor, and him he would fain to put to shame, so he challenged the Isegod once again. 1 feat of strength remains for thee yet to do, thou boastful one, cried Hymir. Seize yonder great kettle, and carry it forth from my dwelling. Tyr rose eagerly and ran to lift the kettle, which the gods waited for in Aegir's hall. But in vain did he try to lift it. Twice he made endeavor without avail. Then did Thor seize the kettle. He grasped it at the edge and shook it violently. Then he began to lift it. So heavy was it, and so great was the strength of Thor, that his feet went through the floor. Hymir watched him with angry eyes, fearing he would take it with him, the great treasure. That was what Thor did, for he lifted the great kettle first upon his shoulder, and then upon his head, while the rings fell around his feet. Then he darted outside, and Tyr went with him. Nor did they stay to await the giant, but right speedily they hastened on their way. Thor took also with him Hymir's great boat. A great distance did the gods journey through the wooded mountain recesses, and then behind them there rose a great clamor. Hymir was hastening in pursuit. From the rocky caverns his foul and strange-headed clan were issuing forth and following fast as well. They bellowed like winter tempests, and from hill to hill cliff their voices rang. Trees groaned and were bowed down, and the earth shook. Thor looked back, and when he beheld the host pursuing him, he put down the boat and the kettle, and seized his hammer Mjolnir. That murderous weapon he did fling against the giants, and they were mowed down by it, as oat straw is by the scythe. Not until he had slain all those who had fled not, did Thor swing the boat and the kettle high upon his shoulders, and with Tyr again pursue his way. Elvagar they could have not crossed in safely had they not had Hymir's boat, for the waves ran high because of the violent writhing of the Midgard serpent as it lay wounded by hook and hammer on the rumbling floor of the ocean. In due time did Thor reach the hall of Aegir with the great kettle of Hymir. Then was brewed sufficient ale for the feast of the harvest end, and the host and guest were made merry. But Thor rejoiced most because of the blow he had struck to the great Midgard serpent, for thus was he avenged upon it for causing him shame in the dwelling of the giant Utgarloki, who had so cunningly deceived him. Of that, his most strange adventure, the tale must next be told. Did you know that Northwoods Kindred has a Discord channel dedicated to frith and sharing of knowledge related to the Norse pagan path? We have channels dedicated to all disciplines on this path and some of the most kind and generous heathens the world over. Are you curious how to pronounce something in Icelandic or Norse? Jump on over to the mother tongue and ask a native speaker. Still not getting it? Up into the Well of Words with voice and video channel to speak face to face. Trying to work out the meaning of a difficult dream? Hop over to Dreams and Visions and get somebody else's opinion. Are you proud of something that you accomplished? Share it with the whole tribe on Braggy's Round. Experience community like only the Northwoods Kindred can bring. And of course, it is free and always will be. The link is in the link tree. Welcome to the Northwoods Kindred's online tribe. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's really nice to break out old text from, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of years ago. I have a lot of old books and be able to read these words from, these stories that were translated by different people in a different time, but they all came from the same source text. So it's really exciting to be able to bring these out and especially expose you to some of the other works that are not, classified as the modern works, and just kind of broaden your horizons. I recommend that if you can get a copy or a reprint of Teutonic Myth and Legend by Donald Mackenzie, it's a good read. All the stories are just as fantastical. I love the language that he uses and the verbiage and the way he does it, although it is kind of confusing sometimes to read it out loud because of the sort of the kind of the old English style of verbiage that goes into it, but it does make for a fantastic read once you kind of get the hang of that. So I hope that you like that. I hope that that you come back for more. My intent is to get these out every couple of days, do really cool stories, expose you to some books or some storytelling techniques that maybe you weren't aware of before. Essentially, I just want to introduce you to other works that aren't on the shelves at Barnes & Noble, or maybe you got to look deep for them. And then hopefully, you can come across some of these titles in thrift stores and stuff. That's where I get a lot of my works. And I hope that if nothing else, you just enjoy listening to it while you're driving to work or dealing with your mundane day-to-day. You get to escape that and just kind of put your head in the game. So with that being said, I'll see you on the next one. I just want to remind you, kick off your shoes, walk barefoot on the soil, get grounded, get connected, and have a great life. Þórr viki.